When you first start studying the classical orders, you'll quickly find there's a whole vocabulary of new terms to learn. Every element has a specific size and place and a specific name. When it comes to proportioning the orders, the key word you read about most often is diameter. Diameter refers to the width, or as Vitruvius explained it, the thickness of the column at its base. This simple dimension becomes the basic unit of measurement for proportioning the entire order. For example, according to most authors, the Doric order's column is 8 diameters tall. The column's base at the bottom and the capital at the top both measure 1/2 of a diameter. The shaft of the column has a gradual taper called an entasis. While the bottom third of the column remains cylindrical, the upper 2/3 taper so that the diameter at the necking of the capital is 5/6 the diameter of the base. The horizontal member or beam that is supported by the column is called the entablature. In this Doric example, the height of the entablature measures 2 diameters tall. Just like the column, this principal member is also divided into 3 elements. The architrave at the bottom is 1/2 a diameter, while the frieze and cornice above both measure 3/4 of a diameter. The projection of the cornice is also determined by the diameter. According to Vignola, the Doric order's cornice projects out 1 diameter from the frieze. To determine the sizes of the smaller molding details, most authors turn to the diameter and begin dividing its dimension into smaller units. While not every author uses the same system, one common practice is to divide the diameter into 60 equal parts, called minutes. With this new smaller unit of measurement defined, a detailed full-page illustration or plate is used to call out all of the molding dimensions. It lists the height of each detail and its projection. With this information, all of the details can then be carved out. The cornice, architrave, capital and base, and then the final details, including the triglyphs and the column's channels or flutes. An excellent example of this system of proportioning can be found in Sir William Chambers' book, A Treatise on the Decorative Parts of Architecture. It's a book I'd highly recommend to anyone with a serious academic interest in the classical orders. But for carpenters, this type of approach to classical proportions tends to make things ridiculously complicated. After all, you're usually given a specific height to work with, the total height, or at least the height of the column or pilaster, never the diameter. And who wants to work out the actual measurement for 11 2/3 minutes? For me, a more practical approach can be found in William Ware's book, The American Vignola, first published in 1904. Ware starts by pointing out that according to Vignola, the entablature and column share a fixed proportional relationship that's the same in all of the orders. This fixed relationship is easy to miss since we're used to seeing a side-by-side comparison of the different orders that looks like this. They're normally drawn so that they share the same base diameter. The Tuscan order on the left being 7 diameters tall, working up to the Corinthian and composite orders on the right, which are 10 diameters tall. Something about this representation always confused me. The Tuscan order was supposed to be strong and masculine, and the Corinthian and composite were always described as delicate and feminine. You don't get that impression from this type of comparison. Instead, you get the impression that there is an ascending height from one order to the next. However, when you view them all drawn to the same height, you can easily see the dramatic difference in column diameter. Then it becomes obvious that the Tuscan order has a much more robust form, while the Corinthian is more feminine. But that's not all. With all of the orders drawn to the same height, you can appreciate that every entablature is equal to 1/4 the height of the column. By itself, that's a pretty simple proportional rule. So let's pretend we're carpenters, and we have to start with the height of the column, not the diameter. If you know how tall the column is, just the column, not the entire order, simply divide the height by 4 to determine the height of the entablature. The entablature is 1/4 the height of the column. If you're starting with the overall height of the order, then you have a total of 5 parts, and the height of the entablature is equal to 1/5 the total height. Here's a simple example. If the overall height is 120 inches, dividing it by 5 gives you the height of the entablature. 120 inches divided by 5 equals 24 inches. This means the column height is 96 inches. Now that we know the column height, it's easy to determine the column's diameter if we need to. In this Tuscan example, we know that the column is supposed to be 7 diameters tall. That's just another way of saying the column's diameter is 1/7 as wide as it is tall. When we divide the column height of 96 by 7, we get a base diameter of about 13 11/16. If we were working with a Doric order, the column's base diameter is 1/8 its height and gives us a diameter of 12 inches. 96 inches divided by 8 equals 12 inches. Another primary member that's often included in an order is a pedestal. Just like the entablature, Vignola gave the pedestal a fixed relationship to the column's height, making the pedestal 1/3 the height of the column in each order. Since the pedestal is 1/3 the height of the column, and the entablature is 1/4 the height of the column, neither of these simple divisions will work to help proportion both at the same time. Ware's simple solution for proportioning an order with a pedestal is to simply divide the column height into 12 parts, a number that's divisible by both 3 and 4. That makes the pedestal 4 parts and the entablature 3 parts. When you put them all together, you come up with a total of 19 parts. 3 parts for the entablature, 12 parts for the column, and 4 parts for the pedestal. If you're starting with the same total height of 120 inches, start by dividing it by 19 to get the height of each part. 120 inches divided by 19 equals 6 5/16. At 3 parts, the entablature is just about 19 inches tall. The 12 parts of the column add up to 75 3/4 of an inch, and the 4 parts of the pedestal equal 24 1/4 inches. Once you have the dimensions established for the principal members, you can then find the diameter of the column. In this Doric example, the diameter would be 9.5 inches. 75 3/4 inch column height divided by 8 equals 9.5 inches. Ware's book also includes plates for setting out all of the decorative details, but unlike most authors, he treats the elements individually, breaking each one down into smaller and smaller parts. This system avoids working with minutes and fractions of minutes. As I said before, I'm a big fan of Ware's book, The American Vignola, but there are plenty of other historical pattern books and authors out there to choose from. One thing to keep in mind is that the proportional rules are really just guidelines or rules of thumb. You can think of them like a recipe. Every cookbook author has their own spin on a traditional dish. It's alright to make adjustments to suit your taste. Just be careful not to stray too far from the original recipe, or you may end up with something that is unrecognizable from the original and hard for everyone to digest.